January 2004, Nintendo announced it was developing the Nintendo DS, a portable device featuring 2 displays. Specific details, including its distinctive touchscreen, were kept under wraps, and little did gamers know that 2 Metroid titles were setting their coordinates for the handheld. At E3 2004, Nintendo unveiled a demo showcasing Samus in 3D for the first time on a handheld. Only this time, instead of locking onto bug-like aliens in a single-player adventure, 4 players took control of Samus in deathmatch battles, frantically tapping the screen to blast each other with plasma cannons. This strenuous and short-lived control scheme was swapped with a much more appealing shoulder button option when a demo titled Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt was released as a pack-in for the launch of the DS in November. Strangely, the game hinted at space pirates and featured Metroids, but neither one of them would be seen in the final version. The demo was a teasing taste, and Metroid maniacs were stuck playing it for over a year because of delays while Nintendo overhauled the game to support online play. Finally, on March 20th, 2006, Metroid Prime Hunters was unleashed. The game was developed by NST, the same company that created 1080 snowboarding on the N64. Like the Prime games on GameCube, Hunters played from a first-person perspective, but unlike its predecessors, the DS version lacked the patented lock-on targeting and was a bit more linear. Chronologically, Hunters took place after Prime, but before Prime 2. Samus was commissioned to investigate the Limbic solar system after the Galactic Federation received a telepathic message stating the key to ultimate power resided there. The Federation feared that other entities may have intercepted the message as well, and Samus soon found herself competing with 6 other bounty hunters. Upon investigating, Samus learned the Limbic sealed a monstrous creature called Guria into a dimensional rift called the Infinity Void. Samus's mission was clear: find the 8 octoliths to unseal the Infinity Void and neutralize Guria before the 6 bounty hunters got too close. Hunters shared the same first-person perspective as other Prime games, but you were given more freedom of movement. Players used the control pad to walk and aimed by sliding the stylus across the bottom screen. The lower screen also provided buttons to change weapons, flip on the scan visor, or roll into morph ball form, all of which were accessed by simply touching the appropriate icon. Jumping was performed by double-tapping the touchscreen, and the left shoulder button controlled Samus's beams, missiles, and bombs. Once players got a grip on the DS, the new setup felt almost as smooth as using a mouse and a keyboard, which in turn made combat that much more challenging since precision became mandatory without lock-on capabilities. With the solitude each Metroid title delivered, it was easy to assume Samus was the only bounty hunter in the galaxy, but frequently throughout Hunters, Aaron encountered the 6 bounty brethren that were racing through the same mission she was. Eventually, Samus found 6 weapons that directly correspond to each rival, which ranged from the electrical flicker of the shock coil to the dead-eye sniper of the Imperialist. Each weapon shared universal ammo and sometimes came in handy during sticky situations. Progression in Hunters demanded less exploring and puzzle solving, leaving a more combat-based adventure. For the first time, Samus piloted her ship to 4 different locations in the system, from a snowy planet to a cybernetic space station, returning to each area at least once before the final battle. Although weapon finding was still necessary, there were no mobility upgrades like the space jump or spider ball, and Samus started the game with many of her tools intact, including the morph ball and bombs, missiles, the boost ball, and the charge beam. Hunters was the only Metroid to use full-motion videos. The opening cinematic introduced Samus's foes, short videos introduced each planet, and boss battles began and ended with brief clips. The videos, at times stretched across both screens, boosted the game's presentation and made the game feel remarkably dramatic for a handheld outing. After retrieving the 8 octoliths and unsealing the Infinity Void, Samus set course for the now-revealed oubliette. Seeking ultimate power, the other 6 bounty hunters unwittingly blasted the seal holding Guria, who then broke free and stole their powers for the final showdown with Samus. The best ending wasn't awarded to players with the fastest time or the most items. Instead, during the final bout, players had to fulfill the Olympic prophecy by shooting symbols around the room in the proper order with the proper weapons. Only then would Guria's true form be revealed, providing players with one more battle, the powerful Omega Cannon, and the pin-up payoff with Samus in her Zero suit. Scanning and collecting all the information and items put a nice little octolith emblem on your hunter's license, a scorecard for the game's biggest handheld first: multiplayer. The Wi-Fi battles in Hunters were robust, featuring 4-player matches complete with numerous stat tracking methods from shots fired to most used weapon, and all of them were logged online. The 7 game modes include variations of Capture the Flag and King of the Hill, as well as Prime Hunter, in which the player with the first kill was forced to take on the rest of the combatants. Multiplayer also featured over 20 arenas, 7 playable characters, and voice chat among friends. The focus on multiplayer in early demos left some people worried that the series might head into a different direction, and the single-player game certainly disappointed ardent fans. Complaints consisted of a much too linear adventure that emphasized fighting bad guys over finding secrets, bland enemy AI, and reoccurring boss battles. However, Metroid Prime Hunters was still well received by critics and gamers, mostly for its hearty multiplayer, slick presentation, and smooth controls. Hunters would keep the dual screens of Metroid fans charging for a while, but it wasn't Samus's only release on the handheld. Rolling into stores a few months earlier was a brand new take on the franchise, a spin-off, so to speak. Gone was exploration, save functions, and lock-on targeting. In were flipper paddles, high scores, and extra balls. Metroid Prime Pinball bounced into stores on October 24, 2005, and came bundled with a Rumble Pack that inserted into the GBA slot. It was developed by Fuse Games, mostly known for Mario Pinball Land, which was released for the Game Boy Advance the year before. Although not the action-adventure Metroid fans were accustomed to, Prime Pinball brought more to the table than your ordinary pinball machine, featuring boss battles, plasma shooting, weapon upgrades, and more. There was no specific storyline in Pinball, although the events in the game were based on Prime for the GameCube. Samus, serving as the ball in her morph form, had to collect 12 Chozo artifacts, gain access to the Artifact Temple, and defeat both forms of Metroid Prime. The controls were simple. The left and right shoulder buttons operated the flippers, while X, Y, and B used weapons. Sliding your finger across the bottom screen gave the entire table a shake for that extra touch of influence. Collecting the Chozo artifacts was done in a variety of ways, which usually involved completing mini-challenges, which were initiated when the ball hit a switch or passed through a special alley. These mini-games ranged from wall jumping to shooting down beetles to killing Metroids and more. 2 artifacts had to be earned by defeating bosses: Thardus from Phendrana Drifts and the Omega Pirate from the Phazon Mines. Samus even earned power bombs and missile upgrades to help defeat them, which she kept for later boards. Missiles could be fired when Samus activated combat mode, which allowed her to temporarily stand and shoot, impervious to enemy attacks. 6 detailed tables represented locales in Metroid Prime and were accompanied with excellent music taken from themes from previous installments. The rainy Talon overworld featured the same theme from Prime, and the Pirate Frigate spun out a guitar-infused remix of the classic NES tune. After collecting all 12 artifacts, the Artifact Temple opened. Here, the 12 artifacts were transformed into pinballs that had to be placed into slots throughout the temple. Players had to frantically manage 6 balls at a time as Meta Ridley flew over the board dropping bombs. Success granted access to the final confrontation in the Impact Crater. In order to defeat Metroid Prime, Samus temporarily gained the Force Ball ability, allowing her to damage the beast when at high speed. Only one ending was available, and Samus wasn't seen in anything sultry, not even the Zero Suit. The multiplayer component in Pinball required only 1 copy of the game and allowed up to 8 players to compete in a race to reach a target score. The battle took place on an entirely new table, Magmoor Caverns. Its tacked-on inclusion was one of the criticisms drawn against the first Metroid DS release, along with its relatively short lifespan. But it was given credit for its crisp graphics and sound, and an unusually engaging take on pinball. Nintendo first revealed its latest home console, then known as the Revolution, at E3 2005. While there was talk of a Smash Bros. Title and first details on the Virtual Console service, Metroid Prime 3 was the only game accompanied by video. Showing Samus's new ship flying and shooting without its pilot in the cockpit, the brief clip offered a first glimpse of the command visor, though no one would realize it for quite some time. A year, the unveiling of the revolutionary motion-sensing controller, and a controversial name later, players finally got their hands on Metroid Prime 3 at E3 2006. The demo allowed for free aiming with the remote, with movement handled by the analog stick on the nunchuck. Interactive locks had players twisting their arms in tandem with action on screen, and a new use of the grapple beam let Samus rip shields from doors and enemies. A mysterious character lent assistance midway, and those lucky enough to reach the mission's end faced off against Meta Ridley in a close-quarters free-fall battle inspired by Lord of the Rings. While the control system had to be perfected, the demo impressed, and gamers began eagerly awaiting the final game, scheduled to launch alongside the Wii. Once again, Metroid fans were told to wait, first until early 2007 and then until late summer, as Retro Studios worked to refine the game. Finally, the closing chapter in the Phase-On storyline would be told when Metroid Prime 3 Corruption shipped on August 28, 2007. The catastrophes on Talon 4 and Aether were significant, but now Samus had to contend with a whole group of planets that had been affected by Phase-On. On top of that, Samus herself had been corrupted by the glowing blue substance, giving her the ability to temporarily enter hyper mode at the price of her health. Retro had listened closely to feedback on the previous two games and added a number of additions and refinements to Prime 3. There was a greater emphasis on story as Samus interacted with the Galactic Federation and other bounty hunters. Players would no longer need to constantly switch beams since weapons stacked like in Super Metroid. The X-ray visor returned to be used in conjunction with a certain wall-piercing beam. Samus could now use the command visor to direct her ship to land airstrikes, lift objects, or create a makeshift platform. For most of 2007, Nintendo remained relatively quiet about Corruption, until early August when it released a channel for the game and placed the classic Metroid titles on the Virtual Console for download. Join us next week as we look back at the saga of Samus, from start to finish, and end our 5-part Metroid retrospective. We'll begin with a look at the 2004 Game Boy Advance retelling of the original NES action innovator, Zero Mission. Its fresh take on the franchise set in motion a story that spans video games, comics, melees, brawls, and possibly the silver screen.